What's up, it's Auto Handles, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the Sacramento Kings. But before I can get into the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Let's begin. I told you all the Kings were getting desperate, but I didn't think they'd go this far. The move they just made was reckless, firing Mike Brown. He was let go right before the team's flight for their Saturday night game against the Lakers. What's wild is that Brown isn't just any coach, he's a former Coach of the Year. In his first season with Sacramento, he led the Kings to a 48-34 record, their best since 2005, and helped them reach the playoffs for the first time since 2006. For the longest time, he was seen as a solid coach. The problem? As soon as he proved the Kings could win, expectations skyrocketed. The franchise finally seemed to be on the right path, and adding DeMar DeRozan was supposed to make them a real threat in the West. But when the team underperformed, the front office pointed the finger at Brown. You see, the Kings were in the middle of a 5-game losing streak, but had a chance to bounce back at home against the Detroit Pistons. This wasn't last year's struggling Pistons team. Detroit had just pulled off big wins against the Suns and Lakers. The Kings, missing Domantas Sabonis due to illness, still managed to build a comfortable 68-53 lead by halftime. Fast forward to the final seconds. Sacramento was up by 3 with 6 seconds left. Jaden Ivey got the ball in the corner, and De'Aaron Fox followed him on a 3-point attempt. Ivey made the shot and sank the free throw, completing a 4-point play and sealing a heartbreaking win for Detroit. It was a boneheaded move by Fox. All he had to do was lightly contest the shot, but instead he made the one mistake he couldn't afford, a foul that turned into a game-winning play. The worst part, Brown had clearly instructed his players to defend tightly but avoid fouling, and if they did foul, it was supposed to happen when Detroit wasn't in shooting motion. So what exactly did the Kings expect from Brown? Should he have benched Fox? There was no way to predict that Fox, typically a smart two-way player, would make such a costly error. It felt like the Kings front office unfairly held Brown responsible for something outside of his control, and just like that, one lapse by Fox cost Mike Brown his job. Doug Christie will step in as Mike Brown's replacement, and while I have nothing against him, I see two major problems with firing a coach this suddenly. First, and this is an obvious one, it hurts team chemistry. The last thing you want is players and coaches not being on the same page. De'Aaron Fox fouling someone and giving up a 4-point play against the Pistons only to brush it off in the post-game interview shows a disconnect. Meanwhile, Brown addressed it head-on, treating it like the serious issue it was. Fox, as a point guard, is supposed to be an extension of the coach on the floor, but that can't happen if he and the coach aren't aligned. Now the Kings are throwing in a new face into the mix mid-season and hoping it works. It feels like the front office knew they had to make a move, but this wasn't the right one. The Kings have a ton of problems, but I'm not sure firing the coach should have been at the top of the list. The second issue is a message this sends. It tells the rest of the team that even one mistake can make you expendable. No matter how good you are, your job isn't safe. Brown had proven he could lead the team to success. They played well in the 2022-23 playoffs and took the defending championship Warriors to 7 games. That performance should have solidified his position, but instead it highlights how even successful stretches can't protect you. It makes you wonder, if you're a key player on this team like De'Aaron Fox, why stick around? Reports have surfaced that Rich Paul, De'Aaron Fox's agent, approached the Kings front office questioning what's the plan here. It seems like Sacramento may have grown complacent, believing their core trio of Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and DeMar DeRozan would be enough to compete. This situation feels similar to what happened with the Bulls. At one point, Chicago was rolling with their big three of Zach LaVine, Vucevic, and DeRozan. But with this kind of roster, it becomes tricky to make trades outside of those three because so much of the salary cap and playing time is tied up in maximizing that core. The challenge is figuring out which part of the trio is a weak link, and right now that's exactly the dilemma Sacramento is facing. Here's the thing, if the Kings decide to move on from De'Aaron Fox, I can't see them still trying to stay in playoff contention. If they're serious about making a deep run, Fox has to be their guy. Despite that, all the trade rumors seem to revolve around trading Fox, while there's barely any buzz about the Kings making moves to upgrade the roster around him. Let's be honest, the Kings just aren't good enough right now. Even if their record looked better, I still wouldn't trust them in a playoff series. Fox can put up monster performances, but it's not always enough, like when he dropped a franchise record 60 points against the Timberwolves, and they still lost in overtime. Sabonis is reliable, giving his usual 20 points and 13 rebounds, but he's not the type of player to consistently carry the team. Then there's DeRozan, who, while still effective, feels like a player outside of his era. He's productive, but at 35 he goes through the ups and downs you'd expect from a veteran at this stage of his career. I've heard the Kings are seriously interested in Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson, but honestly that doesn't mean much to me. Every team trying to compete and needing that extra boost is after those two. Cam Johnson brings offensive firepower, and Finney Smith is a kind of 3-and-D player the Kings can only dream of. But if it turns into a bidding war, the Kings don't have the young talent or draft assets to compete with teams like the Warriors and Lakers, who are also linked to Brooklyn's duo. It feels like the same situation the Heat are in with Jimmy Butler. There's constant talk about trading Butler, but barely any noise about adding pieces to build around him. If the Heat move Butler, they're probably getting depth in return, nothing that makes them more competitive. At the same time, they lack the assets to bring in new talent without sacrificing key players. It's hard to see any potential trades as anything more than swapping starters. They could trade Tyler Hero, but realistically, what's available that's better than Hero? Not much in my opinion. The Kings are in a similar situation. To land a player like Finney Smith or Johnson, they'd likely have to package a significant part of their core. But sitting at 12th in the West, is it worth it? They risk giving up too much just to salvage a season that already looks like it'll end with them watching the playoffs from home. And if there's a world where the Kings don't even make the playoffs after all the additions that they've made, then it makes me question what Fox is doing here. He's in the prime of his career, and there's so many other teams that will want him. Like I've mentioned in another video, if you put him on any other team with a bigger market, he's automatically a superstar. But right now in Sacramento, they continue to underperform while he performs to the best of his ability. Obviously, that defensive lapse against the Detroit Pistons wasn't the best look on him, but I'm confident that he can bounce back. And when he does bounce back, is the rest of the roster going to bounce back with him? Look, DeMar DeRozan is getting older, and Sabonis, we already know what Sabonis provides to the team. Then you got Malik Monk, who's a good player now. But outside of those guys, this roster doesn't seem like it's going to be able to compete in the West for years to come. And De'Aaron Fox really needs to utilize his prime on a team that actually can compete. It feels like the Kings are so close to where they want to be, but they're kind of in the outside looking in. They're not at the level of teams like the Nuggets, who you know can actually go out and win a championship. They're in the type of position where they could probably win a playoff series if De'Aaron Fox plays at his best, and you get kind of the old style play of DeMar DeRozan, and you get Domantas Sabonis doing his usual, then they could definitely win a playoff series. But when it comes to winning a 7-game series against the better teams in the West, I just don't see them at that level. Despite the struggles that the Kings have been going through the past couple of seasons, De'Aaron Fox still seems committed to the team. He said several times that he wants to spend his whole career with the team, which is awesome, but at the same time, he has so much untapped potential if you put him on a real contender. I wouldn't call the Kings real contenders because right now they're on a 6-game losing streak, and the last game that they won was against the New Orleans Pelicans, and it was a close game, 111-109, and that's a game that shouldn't be a close game. You see, the Pelicans are without Zion Williamson, and they have no playoff hopes right now. And so when the Kings play teams like that, it needs to be a statement win. Because the Kings are trying to position themselves as a playoff team, that means it can't be a close contest against a team that doesn't even have hopes to make the playoffs. And just to defend De'Aaron Fox, he's been the leading scorer in all 6 of the games that the Kings have lost in a row. So he's doing his part, obviously minus the defensive lapse he made against the Detroit Pistons. He's been doing his thing. But what do you think? Was firing Mike Brown a mistake? And what moves should the Kings make to secure a playoff spot? Tell me in the comment section below. Until next time, peace.